Alright guys, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the gym, man. So I'm going to be talking about bench press again today. Now, I decided, you know what, man, I have my own gym now, alhamdulillah, in the garage. I could just make a whole bunch of instructive videos for you guys, inshallah. So in today's video, I'm going to go over the bench press, which is a very, very popular movement. If you've been to the gym, you've probably hit a bench press before. But to master the bench press movement is very, very tough. So I'm going to hopefully give you guys some pointers that will hopefully help you guys with your bench press form and in turn get you a stronger, more tight, more secure bench press, and you don't feel so flimsy or you don't hurt your chest or shoulders, rotator cuffs, anything like that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and let's get right into it. So I'm going to go over really quick the mechanics or kind of the thought process that I go through before I set up for the bench press. Now, before I did this, my bench press always felt kind of weak, always felt kind of loose. Sometimes I would tweak my shoulder or tweak my chest or whatever it is. But once I dialed this in, it helped a lot. It helped significantly just with the consistency and with the strength. So I highly recommend you guys follow these quick, few, and simple steps. So first, the setup. Now, when you want to set up for the bench press, it's very important that you keep your shoulders nice and tight and retracted. And retraction means just keeping your shoulders back as much as you can. That's going to ensure that your shoulder and your scapula is in place and it's not moving around during the bench press. If the scapula is moving around or if your shoulder is moving around a lot, it could potentially cause, number one, basically a weaker bench press. You're not going to be able to bench press as much. And number two, you could potentially harm yourself and tear something. So it's very important that you have your scapula and your shoulders nice and back, tight, retracted, and depressed. So you want to make sure you do that. Now, one nice cue that I use to help stabilize my shoulder and my scapula is I like to dig my upper traps into the bench press. I really like to dig it as deep as I can, and I like to retract my shoulders after that. So that helps really keep my shoulders in place. And then after I keep my my upper traps on the bench press, then I try to lower my hips and touch my glutes onto the bench press. Now keep in mind, you want to keep your mid back or your lower traps off of the bench press at all times. Now I know some people think that you need to keep your back all the way flat on the bench press. That is incorrect, and you'll see why here in this clip. When I keep my mid back on the bench press, it forces my scapula to protract, which in turn just completely demolishes all of the stabilization that I established in the beginning in the setup. Now, another cue you got to keep in mind is you want to keep your elbows at a 45-degree angle. You don't want to put your elbows too far up towards your head. You don't want to bring them too far down towards your hips. Keeping it at a 45-degree angle is kind of the sweet spot, at least for me. Some people may want to go a little bit more in, maybe a little bit more out, but you really want to ensure that you're not too far out and you're not flaring your elbows too far out. That also causes instability in the bench press and will make your bench press weaker. So make sure 45-degree angle, keep your lats and your shoulders nice and tight, and that's going to keep your elbows at a 45-degree angle. Now, I highly recommend, if you guys have a camera, if you guys have a phone, record yourself from different angles and try to analyze your bench press and see where your elbows go, where your mid back goes, where your upper back goes. Do your glutes lift off the bench press? You want to make sure your glutes stick on the bench press, your upper traps stick on the bench press, your mid back or lower traps don't touch the bench press. Your elbows are nice and tight. And then the last thing that you guys really got to focus on is leg drive. It's very hard to establish leg drive, and I think it's a little bit easier to do at heavier weights. But of course, you got to practice it at lower weights as well. So that way, when you get into the heavier weights, it's just muscle memory at that point. So what leg drive is basically is you're kind of squeezing your glutes. You're kind of using your legs to push momentum towards your head. Okay, and so when you're at the bottom, of the bench press and the bar is on your chest, when you push the bar back up, you want to also push your legs towards your head, if that makes sense. That's going to help push that bar up above your head, above your eyebrows, and into the final position where you're closing out the bench press. Now, leg drive cannot be useful if your traps are not digging into the bench press, or if your bench press is very oily, or if you don't have good grip on the bench press. So I highly recommend this bench press here is from Rep Fitness. It has the fat pad. I really enjoy this. I'll link it in the description if you guys want to check that out if you have a home gym for yourself. But if you guys are at a commercial gym where the benches are a little bit oiled up, or if there's a lot of sweat on it, or whatever it is, you could get some bands and basically wrap it around the bench press, and hopefully that'll help you get some traction on the bench press. So that way, when you're pushing with your legs, you're not sliding back, you're not sliding further up towards the bench or the rack, and so that way you could effectively use leg drive. Now you also want to keep in mind, you want to keep your glutes on the bench as well, because that is going to help with the leg drive as well. I know a lot of people drive their glutes up when they're hitting a PR or whatever it is, and it's very easy to do that, but to have that kind of discipline to keep your glutes on the bench press, keep your traps on the bench press, and then push as hard as you can with your legs is really going to improve your bench press, make it a lot more consistent, and make it a lot more stable. Now, last thing I want to mention, as you guys watch the last few minutes of the clip, notice how my form does not change, or it is very similar for every single kind of weight that I'm using. So I start off with a 45-pound bar. I add 45-pound plates on each side, so 135 and then 225, 275 and 315 respectively. So every single time I go up in weight, I try to keep the cues in my head, upper traps on the bench, digging into the bench press, then I lower my hips, put my glutes on the bench press, and then I just drive with my legs and keep my elbows in. A very nice cue also to keep in mind is you kind of want to tear the bench press apart. Now, of course, make sure you're chalked up, your hands aren't oily or sweaty or anything like that, but you want to kind of push your hands apart towards the outside of the bar, and that's really going to help also secure your scapula in place. I've really enjoyed that cue, and it's helped me out a lot. Now, in terms of really quick, just the last thing I want to mention, the hand placement. A lot of people actually bench a lot closer than they should. As you develop that scapular stability, and as you're able to get a little bit more tighter of the bench press and just stay tight throughout the whole lift, you're going to be able to move your hands wider and wider, and it's going to make the range of motion obviously less and less. So you're going to be able to bench press a little bit more. Now keep in mind, if you go really wide and you lose that instability for just a fraction of a second, it's going to mess up your whole lift. So keep in mind, you really want to master the bench press motion first, and then hopefully you can get wider and wider and wider as you go along.